Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello, and welcome to this episode number 47 of the Free Cities podcast. Well, I'm recording this introduction at my home here in Wales, but of course by the time you listen to it, I'll be in Prague, making my way through an incredibly busy schedule by the looks of it. I've just been looking through it now. At least 15 podcast interviews. Many of them I can see are conversations I've been looking forward to having for quite some time. The New Hampshire Free State Project, SARC, Liberland, Seasteading, of course, and another catch-up with Titus, where we plan to go through the new and updated edition of his classic book, Free Private Cities. Don't worry though, I will definitely be finding the time to see you all at the event, and especially the accompanying evening socials, so come up and say hello if you see me. I have been watching with great interest this movement gaining momentum online over the last 12 months, but events like ours are specifically designed to help strengthen the bonds between us all in real life. So don't be shy, come and say hi. I didn't know that was going to rhyme. Anyway, back to today, and I have for you a fascinating show about monetary and personal sovereignty with Nik Oraevsky. Now, Nik wasn't always a Bitcoin OG, but his background in traditional finance has definitely helped him to navigate the rather perilous regulatory environment surrounding the foundation and running of a Bitcoin company. As a result, he has many excellent insights into the emerging worlds of cryptocurrency and freedom technology, and indeed how to best isolate yourself from the barriers to freedom that he sees coming. In this conversation, we discuss, amongst other things, the war on cash, the impending bifurcated economy, carbon scores, CBDCs, universal basic income, AI, prepping, digital nomadism, global citizenship, emerging governance models, and I get to ask an expert in the field, is Bitcoin necessary for a free city to thrive? Spoiler alert, Nik's answer may not be what you were expecting. Anyway, the last word, of course, must go to the conference. See you all in Prague. I'm getting very excited now, but in the meantime, you'll have to wait. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Nik Oraevsky. Could you introduce yourself and what Bitcoin Reserve is, just so that, you know, we hear it from you rather than me, because I can tell you what I know, but I'm probably going to get a bit of it wrong. So
yeah, sure, no problem. So my name is Nik Oraevsky. I'm CEO of Bitcoin Reserve. I started in the Bitcoin space. I'll say crypto space, right, at that time. Admittedly, dabbled into other things other than Bitcoin in late 2012, so early 2013. And throughout my journey, I've worked at startups, various startups, including wallet startups. I founded an exchange in Canada. I set up an AIF, which is an alternative investment fund in Liechtenstein. I've also worked at several incubators throughout my journey. And throughout this entire experience, one thing that I really learned and kind of had to deal with day in and day out was how to set up certain structures within various jurisdictions, because Bitcoin at that time, and to a certain degree still, at least the Bitcoin space itself, is rather unclear in terms of how you can operate long-term in the environment. Obviously, there's various things that one can do as a company, as a corporation, in order to be able to abide by the rules. But at the end of the day, those always keep changing, right? So in Europe, Mike is coming in, so that's going to change the landscape completely and things like that. So after all of these journeys, I got back together with my co-founder. His name is Yuri. We worked together at the exchange back in Canada. and we decided to start a brokerage. So he had a couple of clients that he had from his previous brokerage experience, and he was doing OTC. I had the regulatory landscape, right? Basically been more or less all around the world in terms of physicality and also research on how to set up these types of companies. So I suggested to him, hey, why don't we start an OTC brokerage? Bring the clients, I'll bring the infrastructure, and let's get it done. So that's what we did. 2018, Layer 2 Brokers OU, which is the formal name of the company, was born. We had several iterations of what it originally was meant to be. So it was first specifically just a brokerage for high net worth individuals. And then we transitioned a bit more into the retail side of things. So a bit more kind of like the swan, the relay approach, right? And then about a year and a half ago, we wanted to focus ourselves on bringing OTC to the world, right? And particularly to many people that wouldn't necessarily know it exists or its advantages. And that's where we came into the concept of accessible OTC. Because you have companies like Cumberland, right? Cumberland, you have to have 150,000 minimum in order to do just basically a single trade. Their onboarding procedures are incredibly complex. I mean, it's sometimes worse than a bank. And then on the flip side, you have companies like Relay, which are much more smaller focused in terms of the volumes, DCA, those kinds of things. So what we did is we focused in the middle, and we're like, okay, we're going to bring our white glove, high net worth individual approach to this space kind of in the middle of around $25,000 to $150,000 in terms of volume. And that's what we've been doing ever since. In terms of our social media initiatives, as you mentioned, Bitcoin Reserve, the podcast, we started that, I think almost a year ago now. We're going on our 30th episode, if not more, at this point in time. Andrew's actually the host. He's our CBDO. He's really great at those kinds of things. Me, Michael, and the rest of the team, we appear, kind of as needed with guests here and there. So that's where we are today.
Okay, then. So Bitcoin regulation, how's it sort of evolved or / changed since 2013? And do you see it going in a good direction?
Two very good questions. When originally we started with these multiple endeavors, I will tell you that every single jurisdiction had their own spin on it or absolutely no spin at all. There would be often times where we'd get into a conversation with a law firm that was supposed to specialize in fintech, supposed to specialize in financial regulation. We tell them our plans. This is what we're trying to set up. This is how it's going to be funded. This is the vehicle, LPs and all that other fun stuff. We're particularly talking about the IF. And they would come back to us and say, okay, that's really interesting. Let me get back to you. And that was pretty much the case. Isle of Man, Singapore, Liechtenstein, Switzerland. We looked at also parts of Africa as well. And everybody else at that time more or less had the same story.
Can I just quickly ask, what's the main issue? Is it that you're a money transmitter or something like that? What is it everyone's scared of with Bitcoin in the early days?
I think because at that time, there was no unified definition for not only just what Bitcoin is, but also what all the myriad of other things that existed in the quote unquote crypto sphere was, that they feared whatever they would advise might change very quickly. And as a result, their professional careers would be at stake as a law firm. So from that perspective, when you're dealing, especially, kind of at those levels with those individuals, if they ill-advise you, they are legally liable as a result for all of those things. So for them, it was a much safer bet to just kind of say, listen, this is kind of what we think, but we can't fully advise you on how to proceed. And as a result, whatever you'd like to do, you tell us, but you are going to be the one that's predominantly actually driving this and calling all of the shots. When it comes particularly to the definitions, right? I mean, we've seen it Bitcoin labeled an asset. We've seen Bitcoin labeled a currency. We've seen possibly in certain areas Bitcoin labeled a security. We've seen Bitcoin outright banned. And I'm not even going to get to all of the other, kind of quote unquote shit coins in this particular space. There is very difficult. It's very difficult of a challenge from a regulatory perspective to nail down exactly what these would appear in law. And the other problem with this is that, as you know, technology moves way faster than regulation. So regulation is always playing catch up. And as a result of this, their issue, and this is one thing that I, kind of do understand, is that they have, on the one hand, over-regulation and stifling the jurisdiction that they're making the regulation in which case they lose a lot of intellectual capital, they lose a lot of opportunity, and basically you have capital flight and you have human flight out of those jurisdictions, right? Technological flight. And then on the other hand, if you make it completely too loose and then you invite everybody in, well, you get a situation that overwhelms the regulators with so many different actors that they don't even know how to classify, let alone regulate, basically ruining their image on the more or less international space. So this is actually a great example of what happened in Estonia. In Estonia, originally when the FIU, which is the Financial Intelligence Unit, came on and gave this crypto license before it was relabeled VASP's Virtual Asset Service Provider License, they gave it out at very low cost with almost no barrier to entry. So at that time, and this was late 2017, I think, early 2018 when this regulation was put into place, so many different companies started to acquire that license and start to conduct business. What the funny thing is that because we were one of the people that actually went for this license, we understood very quickly how incompetent the technological understanding of the regulators were and just their technical competency period when it comes to IT. So I'll give you an example. We were getting a notification, very standard, from the FIU. Hey, here's the update. Here's, some of the things that are going to be required. Da 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 da. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, the message of this email, it's very long. Why is that? And I clicked the to field, and literally all 3,000 emails of all the companies that have this license appear right then and there. I'm just looking at it going, wow, guys, come on, really? So, you can kind of from there colloquially understand what their level of expertise was when it comes to just basic technology, right? Let alone crypto, let alone Bitcoin. And what happened several months, I would say probably 6 months after the fact, they realized that they were getting so many scams. There was a couple of companies out inside of Estonia specifically that got caught for like $300 million money laundering. They got slapped with a fine. Yeah, I think the co-founders also were indicted to some degree. And all of these things kind of started coming up to the surface. And the FIU looked at it and go, wait a second, oh shit, guys, I think we messed up. So what they started to do was crank up the regulation. From those original 3,000 companies, there was then a new variation of the law. While they wouldn't necessarily revoke anybody's license, right, they would just start to increase the requirements. So, for example, you needed to put in more paid-in capital. You needed to have resident directors. You needed to have a local office. You needed to have a local MLRO, or money laundering officer. And these things came incrementally, but then they continued to go more and more and more and more, because at the end of the day, what they realized was, okay, if we come out in about face, say, hey guys, we messed up. All right, we really invited the wrong type of people here and we're cleaning house. That would put them in a very negative light within the EU, because you have to understand that the regulators and the banking system are very closely intertwined. And once they're letting particular actors within that space, that could threaten their, I don't want to say the word social score, but let's just say their credibility, right, within the EU as a result of that. So from here on in, they basically went to the other extreme that I mentioned of over-regulation, over-compliance, to the point at which from those 3,000 companies that originally got the license, there's only 3 left. 3. Okay? 2 of them are the major banks in Estonia, and one of them is a company that is relatively close to the regulators themselves. Everybody else, they've been basically given a schedule, but it's very quick to understand that the requirements that they're asking of you and how the cadence goes back and forth is just impossible to uphold. You got to have an internal audit, external audit, again, all of the other things that I mentioned to you. And the funny thing is when you go to the auditors in Estonia, you go, okay, guys, we're running a legitimate business here. We like to do an audit. They go, okay, what type of business? Okay, we're a Bitcoin OTC brokerage. Oh, sorry, we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know what to do. Okay, so there goes, most of the available auditors right then and there. Then you go to the smaller ones. The smaller ones, okay, sure, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, but you got to hire, kind of this outside accountant. Okay, well, with that outside accountant, you bring it to them. They go, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What is a cold storage wallet? What is this? How do I keep track of what you actually have? Do I have to do mark to market, meaning take the price of the Bitcoin every single day when I do a transaction? What pricing mechanism are you using? Is it, this exchange, that exchange? What is an exchange? I thought there was only one price for Bitcoin. Anyways, you end up educating the people that are supposed to be helping you. And obviously there's a big conflict of interest in that. Then on the flip side, you can go to some of the major law firms, some of the major auditors, right? And from there, man, I'll tell you, it was a little scary, because when you come to them, effectively, first you have the conversation. This is what we're doing. This is what is needed. They go, okay, that's fine. We can have that happen. Then you get a LOI in the email, right? And you read the LOI, and they go, okay, so first upfront payment, $150,000. Then it's going to be about $2,000 an hour for all of the additional costs. This, and this. Total it up, it's like $400,000 for an internal audit. But then you read the fine print, and then you have a conversation with them afterwards, and you basically, call out some of the points. You go, listen, guys, like, we really don't need this. This is not even part of our business. This is not what we do. They go, yeah, honestly, do whatever you want. Like, we don't care. Pay us the money. We'll make it look right. This is the information that we need. My jaw just dropped. I'm like, so what you guys are telling me, and again, you read between the lines here, right? But what you're telling me is, go ahead, launder money. Go ahead, terrorist finance. Go ahead, do all of those scary, AMLD, anti-AMLD5 directives, and we'll just basically paper it over for you if you paid for us. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, we're trying to run a legitimate company here, and you're telling me just pay me money and it goes the other direction? We don't have that kind of money to pay you, first of all. And second of all, no, right? So anyways, the point that I'm trying to make here is that now with the overregulation, right, they kind of went to the other extreme, as I was mentioning. And because of all of these issues, not only structural, but also just physical in terms of acquiring everything that's needed, what's happening very quickly within the EU, and this leads me to your second question, is where is regulation heading? A lot of people and a lot of jurisdictions are kind of putting a pause on all their initiatives, and they're all currently waiting for MiCA. So MiCA is effectively a European-wide regulatory framework for virtual asset service providers.
What does it stand for?
God. Honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head. I've said it.
But it's specifically cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. And what this is supposed to do, right, is effectively take the AMLD5 regulations and as well as combine them with FATF. So that's Anti-Money Laundering Directive 5, which is the EU directive. And then the FATF is the Financial Action Task Force, which was, it's almost kind of like the European Union of financial regulators, but not really. And they have their own suggestions that countries should follow, but it's really a rule that you have to follow. So anyways, they're picking bits and pieces from those regulatory frameworks, and they're combining it into one unified license for the EU. So if you're a company that does any kind of acceptance of funds from a client, whether you are doing, storage like custody, right? Whether you're doing exchange, it's like OTC or brokerage, or any other kind of business where you have to receive client funds, what they're doing is they're trying to standardize that across the EU. Now with that, there are some benefits, right? And the benefit is that you no longer are going to have special authorizations in every single region. So for example, the way that it works right now is even if you have the Estonian license from the FIU, for example, if you want to do business in Germany, specifically advertise to German clients, you have to register with their central bank. And you have to get an authorization from the central bank. Similar situation in the UK, similar situation in Poland, right? So now as a company, you're like, okay, well, we're operating in the EU, but yet we're handicapped here. We can't do this kind of advertisement this way. We can't really acquire clients here in that way. And it's very messy. So by having a unified structure, at least it's clear for businesses like us, like, what do we need to do? Okay, this is good. But then on the other hand, a lot of the things that they are putting in there simply doesn't match with the actual technology itself, right? And by that, I mean the travel rule, right, is one of the things that they're putting forward. The travel rule is the requirement of anybody who is in the middle of a transaction to record all of the information on the counterparty, right? So I'll give you an example. Our director, one of our director lives in Estonia, right? And this is not exactly effectively the travel rule, but this is a very good analogy to how it works and how it forces people that are not even companies, right, to qualify for collecting KYC AML information. So right now, if you go to Estonia and you have $5,000 euros cash, you go to a jeweler shop and you go, hey, I really want to buy that necklace for my wife. Slap that down on the table. Guess what the clerk has to do?
Get your details. Get your name and address.
not only do they have to get your name and address, they have to verify your identity information, and they have to collect the source of funds. They have to ask you, where did you get this cash from? And they have to qualify it and record that. So,
I mean, verbally though, you could just say,
no. They actually have to collect the documentation. It's not just a verbal
for cash.
Yes,
I got it in a market, or someone bought a mountain bike off me, or something.
That's right. So you see the real world complexities in this. So as a result, what happened in Estonia? Basically, it said, sorry, we just don't accept cash anymore. Like just
really?
Above this amount, we're not even going to take it. They're not even going to bother. And obviously, that goes into the concept of what's happening in the world, the war on cash. But that's perhaps a topic for another day. So, in that analogy, the travel rule is also very similar. So say, I'm settling for dinner tonight, and you paid for dinner, and I wanted to send you some Bitcoin on for my half, for example. Well, you would have to act in the similar capacity as that clerk with the travel rule. You would have to, where did that Bitcoin come from? You would have to record the details of my transaction, right, of my wallet. You would have to then also qualify me, KYC me, collect that documentation, store it for 7 years.
Really?
Yes.
But who do I give it to? Like, who am I supposed to send this information to? Like,
only if you're asked. You're not supposed to send it to anybody, but you're supposed to keep
hold
it. Yeah, just like I think in the United States, you have to keep your tax receipts for 14 years or something like that, right? Are you ever going to get asked for a receipt from McDonald's from 2009? Probably not, but legally you should be keeping it, right? So anyways, things like this are completely incompatible with how Bitcoin works. The whole aspect of financial sovereignty, the whole aspect of Bitcoin, of being your own bank, is the ability to transact freely with one another without encumbrances. And this is literally an encumbrance that's being put into place with the umbrella of kind of unifying this regulatory infrastructure.
So is this, on their part, is this naivety, or is this, is there something a little bit more subversive going on there,
Well, there has been several committees, there have been several meetings of groups of people that are, I would say, well-versed, right, in the technology itself. And then there are people on the other side of the aisle who absolutely don't know anything. They're bankers literally with like 40 years experience in legacy ecosystems. And this is something just completely foreign to them, right? And they're all trying to put forward what is going to keep their businesses alive. So in terms of it being subversive explicitly by design, I don't think so. But in its implications of how those things got together, yes, it does stifle the industry. And this part, I think, while not intentional, does serve a higher purpose. Because what I see generally happening, and we talked about this very briefly in our last conversation with Peter when we had him on our podcast, is that we're entering into I would call a dualistic world, right? A bifurcated economy. And I'm specifically referring to Bitcoin here, right? So what's very likely to happen is that in the future, you're going to have what I like to call kind of legacy Bitcoin, and you're going to have the gray Bitcoin. What does that mean? Well, legacy Bitcoin means that anytime you did a transaction, you followed all the regulations, you kept the information that's necessary, whether you sent it to an exchange, it's KYC, AML, all of the information is there, everything is tracked. And when you go and you want to sell your Bitcoin, say you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, you take that Bitcoin to the exchange runs their chain analysis. They go, okay, we don't see any issues. Your risk score is fine in this, and please provide your documentation. All that documentation checks out. Great, we can give you your fiat currency. Go ahead, buy what you want to buy. On the flip side, then there's going to be the gray Bitcoin. The gray Bitcoin is say, okay, well, I mined my Bitcoin back in 2011 on my laptop, right? There is no trace. There is no nothing. Let's start absolutely fresh. Let's talk about virgin Bitcoin, right? And then you bring that to an exchange. The exchange goes, okay, well, we saw that it got transferred in 2013 from this wallet to this wallet. Well, yeah, I just got a hardware wallet and then I upgraded, all right? I went to HD wallet, for example. Well, why are there all these addresses here? Okay, well, why are some of these addresses connected to, for example, an exchange back in the day that now we consider high risk, like FTX, for example, right? Because now their risk score got updated. I'm sorry, sir, we can't take your Bitcoin. I go, what do you mean you can't take my Bitcoin? Like there's nothing wrong with it. I've been in control of it this whole time. Okay, well, prove it. Now you start to see the issue of taking your Bitcoin and materializing it in the fiat world. So it's much easier for me to go, you know what, screw you. I'm not even going to go into fiat. I'm going to find somebody who's selling their car for Bitcoin, and I'm just going to give him my Bitcoin. So what you're trying to form now is two circular economies. You have the kind of legacy Bitcoin economy, and then you have the real world Bitcoin economy where people are just trading as they would be bartering, as they'd be trading in cash. And these two markets, right, are in very big conflict with one another, because if you're, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of CBDCs, where that initiative is moving, right? The Bank of International Settlements, the guy, maybe
Constant.
not. Yeah, the
big fat guy.
Yeah, that's the one. The quote where, every 100 peso bill is going to be able to be tracked. We're going to see exactly where it's going, what it's being spent on, and this is a miracle. And I'm just sitting there with my jaw dropped, like, you guys, people realize what this means. So obviously that kind of economy, they want to suppress. And going back full circle, right, MiCA is going to be one of those things that would make that type of dualistic world more probable. So that's a very long explanation to kind of the question that you posed earlier.
No, I think I tend to agree with you there. And I think rather than even call it a grey market, I think I call it a black market, because probably what would happen, I mean, if you went, say, go sort of 50 years into the future, potentially you've got three markets. You've got black Bitcoin, white Bitcoin, or whatever you want to call it, KYC Bitcoin, and CBDC. Mm-hmm. And when you're sort of transacting with your friends and nobody cares, you'll probably use the black market Bitcoin because, and if you want to come in and out of a CBDC, you'll have to use the other Bitcoin. And the question is, of course, what happens? Is that a two-tier society in general? I mean, it is another very easy prediction to make about societies that we end up with a two-tier society.
Without question.
And that's and in my book, that's CBDC on one side and Bitcoin on the other, regardless of whether it's grey Bitcoin, white Bitcoin, black Bitcoin. It doesn't really matter.
The one thing that I would add to that is I would definitely see a price discrepancy. So similar to what you see right now, paper gold, right, and real gold, you try to buy real bullion. It's a 15, sometimes 20% markup over spot, right? That's because there's a difference between physical gold and paper gold. And that's kind of what I would start to consider, kind of the legacy Bitcoin. It would be paper Bitcoin almost.
Really? Hold on a minute. I would have thought the other way around. I would have thought there would be a premium on the KYC'd Bitcoin because it was the actual one that had the most utility, really. Probably. I don't know. I mean, amongst the market would decide, wouldn't it, in that case? But it would appear like with the KYC'd Bitcoin, you could transact with anyone potentially. But with the secret stash or the kind of the stuff that's been mixed or whatever, you've got only one way of spending it. That's with someone else who's prepared to take it, really.
That's right. And at the beginning, I would say that the balance would probably be in favor of the KYC Bitcoin in terms of the value, right? In terms of the fungibility, the ability to actually spend it, right? But over time, I very much believe that we're going to see a dramatic shift. And, people say, well, when does that come? What does it look like? I've made this example several times, but I think it's one that is very understandable to the average person. So, you guys flew in here, right? You took a plane. When you went on Google and you searched for your flight, did you see what was added to your price of the ticket and what other metric they used to see which flights you could choose?
No.
Your carbon emission.
Right.
So this flight emits this amount of tons of carbon. This flight emits that amount of carbon. You go, you purchase the ticket. They say, hey, do you want to pay $25 to counter against your carbon emissions in this particular case? Amex, or was it Visa or MasterCard, doesn't matter. One of those credit card providers recently released a credit card that tracks all of your carbon spending, right? So what you're starting to see already is an infrastructure for tracking the amount of carbon an individual creates within an economy, right? And this is another part that's very well connected to the CBDCs, and you'll see in a minute how that works. So this is getting people used to the fact that, I'm spending carbon, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But right now it doesn't impact anybody, right? It's like, I bought a flight, whoopty shit.
It's voluntary as well, is it still?
It's voluntary still, right, correct. Yeah. So what's very likely to happen in the near future is as we move into the shift of CBDCs, As we know, the CBDCs is money going wholesale, meaning that it is directly at the purview of the central banks to be able to control monetary policy, monitor transactions, who you can, who you cannot transact with, and how this money is distributed. So for example, in Canada, there was something called CERB, which during the pandemic was Canadian Economic Relief Benefit, right? Which was like 2,000 or somewhat odd dollars distributed to every individual, no questions asked, right? You had to go through the CRA, which is the Canada Revenue Agency, in order to apply for something like this. But they basically gave it out just willy-nilly. And I'm pretty sure it might still be going on, but that was the test bed for UBI, Universal Basic Income. And what happens now is, for example, inflation's going rampant, right? The actual real cost of food and other things that people need to live is increasing, while wages are stagnating. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to not be able to afford the basic necessities of life. Here in comes the government, goes, hey guys, here's a digital wallet for you. Yeah, it's going to be loaded with 2,000 Canadian bucks a month for you. No problem. But with that digital wallet, they will be tracking your carbon spending. They will be tracking with what parties you're interacting with. And they will also put a limiter of time on when and how you can actually spend this, right? Now we're kind of coming around full circle. So now you have this wallet, I have this wallet. And for example, you go to buy a coffee, right? And that coffee producer, they used some other shipping method that month and their carbon rating went through the roof. So all of a sudden, your coffee that's supposed to cost 100 carbon credits plus whatever fiat currency cost it entails, now all of a sudden is double. And you can't get your coffee. You're going, oh my God, I want my coffee. And I'm here going, oh, hey man, that was a great coffee. But wait, I know you're maxed out on your carbon credits too. How did you get that coffee? Oh man, the guy accepts Bitcoin. Right there. That's the utility, that's demand. That's when the average person will realize, wait a second, if I actually want to be able to spend my money for real world goods, I need to have a system that is not so tightly controlled and dependent on a third party. Instead, I have something that I can freely transact in. And that's when I think you'll have the shift. And people will be begging, people will be going, okay, man, I literally, if I were to give you $1,000 right now, I still wouldn't be able to buy my coffee because I can't buy carbon credits. Or I don't have the facilities, the repo markets, or whatever other things exist to acquire that. I can't. But I can get Bitcoin. I can pay you $1,000 for $100 worth of Bitcoin to buy some coffee. And I need my coffee. So that's when I think we'll have a shift. When that comes, I don't know. Does it come? I don't know. Maybe I hope not, because obviously all the other systems have to be in place for that to become a reality, but it's possible.
Well, I mean, it'll certainly happen with travel. As you say, already it is. Do you want to offset this? Are you going to be a nice, virtuous person right now? If not. But later on, I think that will be one of the most obvious ways in, because people associate air travel and road travel, etc., with climate change. They make a very direct connection with that. And it would be easy to start adding it, especially on flights, legitimately. But I mean, gosh, it's a dystopian potential right there. What it made me think immediately was it's forcing a worldwide black market to appear. I mean, normally black market, we've all traveled to a country where there's a black market going on, and there's degrees of black markets, but this would be a worldwide black market, like you say, a two-tier financial landscape, Wow. So, gosh. So come on then. I mean, I've heard varying explanations of CBDCs and how they can definitely not work and how they definitely can work. Do you know the arguments either way, or do you think it's just the arguments are all in favor of them actually happening?
This is a very nuanced and deep question. I think it depends on the party who's asking the question and to which side you want to answer. So let's just kind of zoom out, right? Right now, we've been living in a society of debt on debt on debt on debt, right? This is something that cannot be sustained, okay? The current financial system as it is currently constructed cannot survive, right, in the long term on this type of methodology. So there needs to be a shift, a move to a new type of system for any type of global commerce to continue to exist. And this is still even important for people that use Bitcoin, because if there is no economy, that don't even worry about Bitcoin, okay? Worry about food, worry about water, worry about security. You're going to have other issues. This is kind of like global collapse type of situation in terms of the financial side of things. So from that perspective, this system cannot last. There needs to be a transition to something else. But in that transition to something else, there's this kind of intermediary period where they feel the way to transition is to be able to really finely control all of the levers that they currently do right now through the overnight markets, through the repo markets, and all of the ways that they are currently right now able to influence the amount of money in circulation, right? The M1 and the M2 money supply, as well as also the velocity of money, or how quickly money changes hands through this ecosystem. Right now, that's done with the help of banks, right? Banks are the intermediary. Banks are effectively the creators of money through debt. Moving to a CBDC and a centrally controlled system, you remove those parties, but what you're able to do is very fine-tune control the amount of cash in circulation, not only just in your economy, but in a local economy, even in a town, even in a small residence area, right? And based on that central control, you hope that you can stave off this collapse until a new system is in place. And I'm not actually saying that CBDCs are the new system, okay? Human beings, I forget what podcast I was listening to, but it was very poignant. They say, we don't even know how to function in a different financial ecosystem. Like, this has to be something so dramatically different that we've known for almost 1,000 years, right? That has to carry us forward after the system is done. So what the CBDC is just a stopgap between what will be, which literally nobody knows, and what is now. Because what is now is coming out of control, and all they're trying to do is just at least try to grab it and coerce it a little bit longer to continue on doing what they're doing. So from that perspective, right, CBDCs are necessary. Like, the economy will self-destruct if they're not put into place in just a matter of time. We hope that Bitcoin will be ready as a replacement system when that does happen. But if that happens tomorrow, I'm sorry to say, we're not ready, right? So that's the argument that I would make for CBDCs if I were to really force to. But on the other side, I myself personally would rather live in a world full of chaos than a world full of control at such a degree. I feel that there's enough things that I have put into place myself, and also from a intellectual standpoint and just a humanistic standpoint, that I would rather take my chances and live a short, free life than one of confinement and suffering that's prolonged indefinitely. So those are kind of the arguments for and against that I would say CBDCs. You know, the other more, how would I say it, common arguments that people have made, that I've seen people make for CBDCs, especially the people that are at the top trying to push these things, is, oh, it's going to be so much more efficient for you. You know, it's going to be so much easier. You can just click a button and pay your taxes. Everything that you need to do in terms of your spending is going to be available for you to see. You can do better and easy budget planning, for example, right? It's just going to be easy and efficient. And the problem with that is that a lot of people, you know, that are so used to how current society functions, is anything that's easy and essentially incentivized, like I mentioned to you before, where you don't really have much an alternative. You have a hard path or you have an easy path that's more of control. People are going to take that path. So they're just going to go, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, okay, it is convenient. Yeah, maybe I will use this. But hey, man, I'm going to be able to go buy my cigarettes and whatever because I got just, you know, some free money in my government digital wallet here.
Yeah, personally, I think people were more likely to adopt CBDC because of UBI, not because it's easy. Because I think most people really don't care. I mean, it's not, spending money in recent times has never been that hard. And doing your taxes, yeah, it's a ball ache and it's annoying, but people do them because they are. But if you start saying, here's $2,000 a month, only if you get this particular form of currency and this particular wallet, I'm pretty sure everyone's going to go for it. It's free money, you know. It's literally free money. And what's your opinion on CBDC, on UBI then, Universal Basic Income?
This might be a bit controversial, but if there was no UBI, then the trajectory on which we are heading as a world would result in a, let's just say, culling of a lot of people. a lot of people, right? So if you're
as in actual death that we're talking.
Yes, yeah. And I'm not talking about immediate death, but I'm talking about starvation. I'm talking about malnutrition. I'm talking about increase of disease. Basically everything that's happening right now, just in hyperspeed, right? So from that perspective, if you're looking at kind of for the greater good, right, of humanity, if you want to keep more humans alive, then yeah, UBI is actually something that's functional, because within the current ecosystem that we're operating in, the average individual at that time will simply not be able to produce enough value in that society economically to get the benefits to buy what they need to survive. So you do need some kind of system, right, to be able to provide for them. But in doing so, providing for them, therefore you control them, right?
And what is it about the system that means they won't be able to generate income?
So right now, there are several trends, right? You obviously have automation. You have artificial intelligence. That's pushing a lot of people that before thought they had job security out of that field. Effectively, we're moving on a trajectory from a technological standpoint where a lot of the jobs are going to be taking a component that doesn't require human interaction, whereas the only human interaction is the one that's programming the AI, controlling the systems, and kind of managing everything, right? And that's a much smaller percentage than the actual population. Look at just basic also technological automation in terms of systems. It was in California or New York or something, the first humanless McDonald's opened, right? There's literally like one IT guy and maybe somebody else that's kind of overseeing it, but that's it. The whole thing is run by robots. You order at the kiosk, your food gets built by the robots, and the delivery comes, in the future, quote unquote, also without a driver. It's droned in, or it's, I'm not saying that the Tesla truck is ready in any way, shape, or form, but, it's some other automated fashion or automated logistics, right? There's no need for the bottom line worker at this point in time. So what do those people do? Well, those people turn to creative pursuits. But in creative pursuits, it's a very asymmetrical return, whereas you have 1% of the 1% making a lot of money, an insane amount of money, and then you have the rest almost making zero, if not nothing. I mean, as a parallel, kind of look at OnlyFans. There was like a study that was done. The top 95 or something percent of girls on OnlyFans or content creators earn under $200 a month. Right. And you hear all this, this person's making like 10 million a month or 600,000 or whatever. Yeah, those are very select few. So anyways, you're going to have a lot of society pushing these creative endeavors. Creative endeavors are asymmetric. They don't pay. What do you do with these people? How do you feed these people? So that's number one. You have a pressure from just a opportunity perspective.
Before you go on, what about the theory that new jobs are going to be created, as in things we can't quite think of yet? I hear a lot of people say that, yeah, AI is going to put me out of a job, but AI is going to create a whole bunch of new jobs that we know nothing about. Is that, do you think that's a bad theory?
I personally haven't thought about that angle myself. If I were to just kind of ponder, I would say that yes, new job creation will happen, but I don't think it will be as accessible to somebody who's uneducated, right? As somebody who is an entry-level worker. Meaning, yes, new jobs are going to be created, but those jobs might not necessarily be as accessible as old jobs of the old age used to be. And whether there's enough of those new jobs to cover everybody else, that I highly doubt.
It's a kind of blue-collar, white-collar thing.
That's right. So you have that structural element, right? And then you have the other side of this just spiraling economy where you have unrestricted money printing, you have financial warfare on a global scale, you have de-dollarization, you have people that are countries, right, that are forming their own pacts like the BRICS. Effectively, what you're seeing is the destruction of a global network of commerce to a certain degree. And this is going to cause turbulence within specific countries, that turbulence thereby being either economic suffering, inflation, or something else, which would put even further pressure on the population. So those two things, I think, will really drive the UBI necessity, right? Or kind of the need for people to have something to meet their bottom line, because just they will not be able to do it any other way.
But so, all right, let's say UBI is important. Obviously, the long-term effect of UBI is for those exact people is going to be, well, it depends. Obviously, there's two schools of thought. UBI gives you the space to find out what you really want to do. Or UBI is like welfare. Once you get hooked on it, there's no climbing out of it. Which one are you?
The latter. Yeah.
And so But then, well, what do you do? Say you're in a government and you're looking at the prospect of issuing UBI. Is it another case of let's just kick the can down the road as long as we can before, I mean, what kind of future? What would you do?
That's also something that I've asked myself in the past. Looking at all of the restrictions that happened over the last, since 2020, things that have been happening since 2008 structurally in the financial systems, I kind of asked myself, like, okay, if I was the person in control and I was said, okay, listen, like, save humanity, man. Like, we need to do something, otherwise the world will fall apart. What do you do? And cynically, I have to say that a lot of the things that are being put forward right now are probably the easiest to be able to actually get adopted, that provides me some semblance of control to at least give me more time to figure it out, right? Because I don't have an answer. And I don't think anybody outside of maybe a very few people in very clandestine areas have an understanding of how these things may even possibly get fixed. And for me, at the end of the day, I'm looking out for my own skin, right? My own family. And if for me, in order to be able to be reelected, I need to kick the can down the road, or I need to buy myself some time, and these are the policies, these are the downstream effects, I'm not even thinking of the downstream effects, okay? I'm thinking of tomorrow. I'm thinking of next year. I'm thinking of my reelection cycle. That's the reality of how an individual would operate. And you take that and you multiply it, amongst a mass majority, and I'm talking about of those people in power, right, of those systems, and you kind of get this lackadaisical movement sloggy through all of these types of things, right?
Is there any future, according to you, in which a CBDC gives rise to liberty in any shape or form?
Not a chance. No. I think again, if being brutally honest, right, the current economic system, and we said this before, is non-sustainable, right? But it's the same situation as the bank bailouts in 2008. If you bail out the banks, yeah, you're avoiding pain in the short term, but you've created a structural problem that will haunt you for decades, if not generations, right? And it's a similar situation here. Right now, it would be better if everybody would prepare for the worst, and I mean total breakdown of communications, total breakdown of financial systems, total breakdown of everything that we find to be normal in the world, have a plan of action locally, right, to deal with those things. So we move in a decentralized way to solve this problem. Basically, hey guys, it's like hurricane planning, right? Hurricane's going to hit, like it's coming, all right? This family does this group does this city does this. You guys come together, figure it out, but it's coming. You guys deal with it. Here's some resources, figure it out, right? And I think this is what's necessary from a global perspective, is that everybody is made aware that, listen, like guys, everything's going to collapse. This system needs to be erased. A new one needs to be created. We do not know what that new one is, but we sure as hell know that this one needs to self-destruct today, right now. Press that button, chaos, absolute chaos for maybe 100 years. I don't know. But after that, you will see a true blossoming of humanity, assuming humanity survives, right? That's at the point where we are at. And I think the people that are in control to a certain degree, or have a lot of degree of control, know this. And that's why you see how many bunkers are being built in, just above Australia, New Zealand, right? The multi-billionaire bunkers that are there. You have the underground cities in Utah. You have all of this people in Silicon Valley, even for the last 10 years, maybe even 20 years, buying out all of this land and building bunkers. People know that there's something unstable in the future, right? The question is just, when does it happen? And I think the people right now in control are saying, okay, well, we're going to kick it down the road as much as we can to give us as much control to maybe solve this problem, because we do. Because obviously I'd rather live the world that I live in now than live in this chaotic society and try to survive for 100 years. It's much better for me to keep things the status quo. But then at the same time, we are prepared, right? And I think that should be the mentality of everybody. Be like, hey guys, a storm is coming. Things are barreling through. It's going to happen. It's happening right now. This is what's going to happen. Prepare for it. Decentralize. Try to solve those problems locally. Get ready for it. And in a year, we're pressing the button. So if you guys are ready, you're great. If not, you're not. Boom. That's the only way. Cynically, but
so what are you, practically speaking then? What are we talking here? What are you doing? What are you doing for your family, for your friends? I don't know. You know, the hurricane's coming. You know, how are you going to deal with it?
I've never wanted to be a, kind of quote unquote prepper, right? I've always enjoyed going outdoors. I've always enjoyed self-reliancy. I've always enjoyed bushcraft and things like that. So to me, what I have been doing is collecting knowledge in various areas, not necessarily of survival, but of being able to function in a capacity that will acquire the goods that I need, right? So, for example, spearfishing, right? I've been an avid freediver for quite some time, and when I came here to live in Montenegro, I wanted to do spearfishing, so I started to learn. But you start to realize that fish are pretty smart, and there's different types of techniques. Again, it becomes its own art, right? And similar thing for growing food, for raising cattle, for being able to acquire even lumber or build something, right? These are skills, these are trades that are really important. So for me, I try to learn as many of those as I personally can, considering my time, right? Things that I think will feel to me the most crucial within my current environment, while outsourcing connections to people that have the relevant skills that I need to function. So it's almost kind of like I'm planning for a connection with a very small subset of individuals that we can collectively help each other live. Okay, you have a boat, you can go fish. Okay, you have a spear gun, you can go acquire that. Okay, you have a little plot of land, you can grow as food, and we come together as a small collective. So if things hit the fan, so to speak, we come together, we know what's happening, and at the very least, we can weather the local storm that comes. Obviously, we're not going to fend off an invading army. We're not going to fend off any massive push by some kind of collective group. We don't have that power. But I think personally, that's very difficult to do. To acquire that kind of power and build your own army. I mean, that's like what you would need to do. So practically, yeah, forming communities, forming knowledge, forming skill sets, understanding those trades. And I think, this kind of brings us very well into the topic of free cities, of, what Montenegro is doing and things like that.
Before I do, though, my only problem with that theory, because I currently live on a pretty remote, a former farm in Wales, and not much around there. So, we in one hand, we figure in a scenario like that, we're in pretty good shape. But the one thing I've often thought sitting out in my front garden, looking at the things growing, is that as soon as if the shit really did hit the fan, everyone from the cities is going to come out looking for food and whatever in the countryside anyway. So it just becomes I don't see how that system ever works out for the better. So that outcome, the kind of chaotic one, which personally, I don't know. Obviously, this is grounded in no information at all, other than my sort of experience of humans and human nature. I just feel that extreme chaos isn't about to ensue on a global scale. I can't imagine it happening, and that doesn't mean it isn't not going to happen, but just based on watching even very serious events happening in certain countries prior to this, people voluntarily cooperate with each other on a daily basis, and even in terribly chaotic situations, that the propensity of humans is to try and cooperate, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I'm optimistic that that's more likely to happen than people grabbing arms and just protecting their own property or their own food or whatever.
I completely agree, right? And when I say, chaos, it's not that I'm saying it's more likely, right? I'm saying it's probably going to be better for a longer term result to do that sooner rather than later. Right, and to slowly kind of dissolve into this type of dystopic life and this type of chaos, because then it lasts longer. It's almost like, again, the example one could make is you have an infection, right? You have an infection on your arm. You do not have any way to medically take care of it. You know that it's going to spread. Well, your only option is to cut off the arm. You can wait until it gets here, or here, but now it's close to your lymph nodes. How close do you want to get it? It's probably better for you to cut it off immediately as soon as that happens, and that that's an inevitability. So at least you have more of your hand to put a prosthetic on and function away in some way, shape, or form. Is that more likely? No, because I'm not going to cut off my own hand. It sucks, okay? It's really hard to do. So even though I can say that, and I say that it would be easier collectively for the long run, it's certainly not more probable because human beings don't act like that, right? We are going to slowly move into this outside of some catastrophic cataclysm, that occurs, which would push something like this, which would cut off the arm regardless of whether we want it or not type of situation. And going back to kind of previously what you said when, living on a more rural area and people coming in from the cities during this type of upheaval, I definitely think that would certainly happen. One of the quotes, and this is by Catherine Austin Fitts, she used to be the head of HUD, which is House of Urban Development, I believe, if I'm getting that correctly, in the United States. Anyways, if you're familiar with her in the Solari Report, really great analytical mind, takes everything down to the numbers. So she always says, if you can't defend something, it's not yours. And to that, I reply, absolutely. So if I have land and I think that land is mine, unless I have the capacity with either my immediate family or my surrounding neighbors to defend that, I know that that's really not mine. So that's why, practically I focus on things that I can immediately control. I can control my skill set. I can control the people that I meet and that I make friends with. I can control how I create a kind of functional economic ecosystem within all of us between these individuals. Those things I can control. Everything else, if I have it, that's great for the time being. That's awesome. But I'm also not going to be too sad when I lose it because I have the alternative kind of plan. So
you've spent quite a bit of your life switching between jurisdictions. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Talk to me about that then. And have you noticed that, number one, it's an emerging way of living, for example? Number two, is it easy? And do you find communities quite easily? And I suppose what I'm getting at is, do you see a movement in that direction of people? I think is a contemporary phenomenon, but you probably boots on the ground seen a lot of different places in the context of literally being a digital nomad, say, or actually, settling for long periods of time, not just traveling. Do you see that that kind of, is it an emerging thing now? Something that's going to get sort of like more prominent in the future?
I absolutely think so. I have noticed gaining more prominence. For me, I didn't really actively seek this life. It just kind of came by way of what was going on around me and in the world. So for example, when my wife and I got married, this was, I think, going like 14 years ago at this point in time. And we were living in Canada, and, we kind of had this idea, okay, we're going to have this white picket fence, we're going to have this dog, this family, our kids are going to go to the school, they're going to grow up with their friends for years and years, going to go to the high school and everything else, kind of the quintessential American dream, right? And then as life started to evolve, we realized, okay, wait a second. The school system, and again, I'm not going to dive into these topics, so just kind of trust me on this. Anybody can do their own research. The school system is fucked in Canada, okay? I'm not sending my kids to any kind of school that is public within the US and or Canada. Okay, well, that means that we're going to have to homeschool. All right, healthcare. Well, I want to be able to go and take care of myself within this local region. I want to know the hospital. I want to know the doctor. Well, pandemic showed us something about healthcare and who to trust and how to function within this environment. Okay, so healthcare is not really something that I can get locally either. All right, well, at the very least, I have my neighbors. And I can go into several examples where I've realized, wait a second, these people are not my neighbors. These are people that just live beside me but don't give two shits about who I am or my family. And I've been living here for 5 years beside them, okay? Now looking at all those things, I'm like, wait a second. Okay, then what is the advantage of me being local in this one area? Okay, pretty trees, great ocean, and wildlife. Okay, that has value. But there's other places in the world that provide those things. So then we realized, okay, well, we can't predict where things are going to go. We can say that realistically in this area, some things might go in this trajectory, that trajectory, but over the long term, it's impossible to predict what jurisdiction is going to be good, who's going to treat you how, what governments are going to do in which area. So we realized, okay, well, what we have to do is we have to tailor our life to be digital nomads to a certain degree, but what I like to call is global citizens, right? We are citizens of the earth, and we are going to go to whatever, country has been surrounded by whatever imaginary line and whatever treaties that treats us best. And then we would go there, and then we would be able to establish ourselves, get the basic necessities that we need, which is access to good food. And I'm talking about real food, access to people, human beings that know what they're doing within that local region. And of course, being able to access kind of the legal, the more formal side of how to operate life within that region. You get access to those three, you're set up. You can realistically do that with, some good work and due diligence within 6 months, right, of being within an area. And when we realize that that is going to be the case, we're like, okay, this is the lifestyle, right? Okay, right now it's Montenegro. Maybe next it will be somewhere else. Maybe it'll be El Salvador. Maybe next time it'll be Argentina, or maybe it'll be somewhere in Thailand or this or that. But we've seen other people that have lived a very similar lifestyle to us. We've spoken with them. We've looked at their kids, and their kids are brilliant. Like young minds, they actually could have eye contact with you when you speak. They're not glued to a phone, I'm like, wow, I wish my kids are going to be like this. And they raised them because they just traveled for work, right? So they couldn't send them to a public school. They were always being displaced because of their job, right? The needs of their job. But for us, it's a decision that we impose that affects other parts of our life. It's not like job impacts where we are. It's we impact what job we get, or how we find work, or how we make money, or things like that. So, again, insofar as, is it a trend? Yes. Have we met people locally in the community there of like mind? Yes. And we tend to gravitate around those centers. And I mentioned to you, Porto Montenegro, which is just over the hill there. Even though most of the people speak Serbian in this country, a population of like 680,000 or 700,000 or something like that, in Tivat, it's like you hear English every 2-3 people, right, as you walk by. That or Russian currently. But it feels that it's an international community. And then when you speak with them, they go, I live this kind of lifestyle. Most of them are well enough financially to be able to have a life like this. So I found that you meet a certain level of individuals that act as global citizens, because it's not accessible to everyone, right? It's not like you can be a global citizen on the cheap. You can be a digital nomad on the cheap, right? You can travel with your laptop to, Phuket and do work, and you can go to the Caribbean and do work and this like that. But the second something happens within those regions, you're screwed. You have no ability to exert any kind of economic or political power on your behalf. You have no connections. You're basically back on the plane to where you were originally living, right? And you're stuck there. So there's the difference between digital nomad and a global citizen. A global citizen really does a lot of foundational work within whatever jurisdiction they are to be able to set it up. But it's also like a transitory lifestyle where at any point in time you can tear that teepee down, put it on your back, and go elsewhere, which is, again, kind of full circle, brings me back to Bitcoin. You try to leave a country, right, with a certain amount of wealth, whether it be in a briefcase in cash or whether you just try to transfer it from point A to point B via SWIFT or SEPA, try doing that. You're going to have some questions from the bank first and foremost, and if you're doing it via cash, good fucking luck. It's not going to happen. Well, here, there's a song where one of the things where I have my net worth in my laptop bag. And I think it's by Grammatic, Grammit. It's like 2013, 2014. It's like a, kind of nerd rap, so to speak. But it has that one line, and it's just stuck with me to this day. Basically, I do have my net worth in my laptop bag, and I can travel freely. And okay, so you confiscate my hardware wallet? Cool. It's up here. You're really going to have to do a wrench attack if you want to do that. So, that kind of coincides with being a global citizen. So,
all right, let's talk a bit about global citizenship then, because I like the idea of it, but I've had an experience which is slightly different, and it basically has kind of shown me, I think, that global citizenship for many is not a satisfactory way of living. They want roots, and they want their roots to go quite deep into a particular place. Do you think you've got to be a certain type of person, or do you think it has a detrimental effect? And I was thinking, you mentioned kids earlier. I think that can be a bit of a tightrope, because I think what kids love is often when they're young is a solid foundation that they know, and that's repetitive almost. They want to wake up in the same bed every day, and it's all, and I fully understand that now, I've got 3 of my own. And so one of the pitfalls of moving is that potentially you have a sort of an insecurity within your kids. I think obviously on the flip side, you tend to be a very close-knit family unit as well, which could, in my estimation, would be the foundation. But, what do you think? What do you think about that? Am I onto something there?
Well, that hits very close to home because I live that lifestyle, right? I'm not the first one to kind of do all of this jurisdictional hopping. My family was originally living in the USSR, so they escaped the USSR, the Soviet Union. We moved to the United States. Within the United States, we moved around several times. After United States, we moved to Canada. Within Canada, we moved a certain amount of times. So for me, as a child growing up through this, right, I left Russia when I was 5. I always felt that I didn't have a home, right? Like a true home, like roots, right? Friends would always change. Schools would always change. The only constant in my life would be my family. And if there were some issues in the family, then that constant can be a negative thing, right? So it's very critical that that foundation stays intact. And over time, through doing this, I would consider myself, as a result of that experience, having no allegiance to any one place, right? So for me, it's almost easy to say, oh, okay, this place is fucked. Bye. Okay, this place is good. Welcome. You're welcoming me? Okay, great. But I can see that if I lived a lifestyle where I was more, like my grandparents, for example, they grew up in the same place, they live in the same house for 40 years, and they have the same friends and everything else. If I were to say that, hey, listen, your place is really bad right now, and it's actually happening, right, in Russia, currently what's going on. And my parents are telling my grandparents, like you should leave. Like, it's bad. They're like, no, like we can't. This is our life. It's getting worse and worse by the day, but I can't leave. I can't leave these things behind, right? So, does it have a negative impact? Yes, without question, for the child's development, for how they deal with the interpersonal relationships, social. I won't kind of go into the details of what those effects are, but there are certainly effects, and they can be negative. So you have to take what you see as the reality of those negative effects and balance it with the positive. So, at this point in time, I ask myself, okay, I live this lifestyle, and what are some of my personal quirks and some of the things that I like and I dislike? If I were to have children and live locally, say in British Columbia, in Vancouver, right, what would my kids likely be exposed to? How would they turn out? What would be their life trajectory? And when I look at that, I go, you're suffering being a global citizen and digital nomad, man, because they're going to cut off your penis. It's funny, but there's some serious things going on right now with, in British Columbia in particular, one father got arrested because his son, right, got gender replacement therapy without parents knowing, which is allowed now at 14 years old or 12 years old in British Columbia, right? So they got gender replacement therapy, and they were going to do the operation. He said no. He got sent to jail. So anyways, you see what I'm saying, right? There is negatives of being a digital nomad, a global citizen, but the other option right now in that place is way worse. So deal with the negative consequences.
What about the notion of independent jurisdictions forming in the future? Do you think that's possible? I mean, proper independent jurisdictions, not sort of tax havens, not regulatory havens or whatever you want to call them, but actual jurisdictions emerging that manage to get some kind of sovereignty. Do you think that's conceivable?
I hope it is. I really do, because that would be the intermediary step to, kind of this jurisdiction bunny hop that you have to do. I would much rather have a location of maybe 3 or 4 cities within the world, right, that I know that I can freely traverse between, that have a stable set of laws, that have a stable fundamental economy, that have a stable governance structure. And I would simply then relegate myself to those jurisdictions. Those would be my homes, right? And however I traverse between them. So that would actually be much better, because it would solve, a lot of the issues with being a pure global citizen and jurisdictional hopping all the time. As you mentioned, there are negatives associated with that. So I truly hope that is the case. And I'm kind of also curious from your side what you feel about this topic. But for me personally, I think there's a lot of challenges in setting up something like this to be long-term resilient. In the short term, absolutely. I mean, we already see it happening around the world, right? But how do you sustainably grow? I hate that word, but how do you sustainably grow that into something that could really stand against the other elements that are trying to destroy you? And that's the part where I can't answer, of how do you defend once you've created something so beautiful.
Yeah, agreed. I think the argument would be that the reason that some kind of jurisdiction might be granted independence, for example, would be because the political might in that particular state had inherited some, say, libertarian qualities. Maybe some youngsters come in and gone up in the ranks and were thinking like this. And as a result, you end up with a sort of like stage by stage process of getting independence. And you would hope that that might be something that would rise in a decentralized fashion. I mean, this, let's face it, for me at least, this is a battle. It's not even a battle. It's the yin and the yang of life, and it's the centralized arm and the decentralized arm in this constant dance with each other. And you can see that technology seems to be scaling the centralized version pretty well at the moment. You get to sort of get quite powerful tools, but by default, that means that the decentralized tools begin emerging and the decentralized ideas begin emerging. And like you say, your average Canadian now, I mean, look, pre-pandemic, Canada was, for most people, utopia. And it's definitely got a very different, sort of sense now, certainly from outsiders. I know plenty of families that have left, living in places like El Salvador, Mexico, just because they've seen what you've seen and said, it's not for me. So my argument would be that in the end, everyone comes up against this power. Everyone gets included in this dance, in this kind of battle. And people will probably, well, not necessarily, but I would hope people would choose freedom given the option, because I'm sure that deep down we all want freedom. But yeah, it's a complicated thing, and I'm in the same boat as you. I hope, and I can see now what's happening. I mean, you can see a movement of people certainly talking about this. I mean, I was an analog nomad. I travelled. Pre-digital age, mainly Southeast Asia, and India. And there were very limited opportunities for me to make a living on the road, or even to think about traveling to new jurisdictions. And it was mainly because the internet wasn't evolved enough for me to find anything out. The internet's the thing that's driving this whole thing. You can see it very, very clearly now. Looking back in hindsight, you can see this movement of information explosion giving rise to people having ideas about what they actually want for themselves, rather than just being sort of spoon-fed a bunch of ideas through the sort of normal channels. And I would posit that this is a moment in history, and the proliferation of ideas would mean that more people would get, as more people get exposed to the notion of liberty, and as more people come up against the forces against liberty, which appears to be happening, you create new people with new thoughts who want to create new places or new communities, or move around, or break all the old molds. I mean, what is undeniable is shit's changing completely. Everything we ever knew, all our institutions, all our formal ways of doing it, truth, everything has been shot to pieces by this proliferation of free information that the internet has given us. And what will come out of that, obviously, will be positive and negative. I'm just hoping that me personally, I'll be walking in the realm of the positivity.
And do you think that it takes a certain type of person to fight and accept freedom than to become complacent with the status quo? Do you think everybody has the capacity to be free?
No, and I'd tell you why. Because I watched what happened during the lockdowns, and I saw people who I considered to be quite, I considered them as a similar mindset to me, bend over and take it immediately without a thought, without even a thought that, wait a minute, that's a bit weird, or that's a bit full on, or that's a bit too much. Whereas there were, in the end, as it turns out, a very small minority of us who actually went, hold on a minute, this is this is way too much. This shouldn't be happening. And it was 2 years of a emotional and mental and physical battle to maintain that position. It was a very strong onslaught. I don't know whether you felt it yourself, but it was
within the family too.
Sure, I mean, exactly. Another reason why I don't think so. I think that, you had family members going against other family members over things that really should have united them, I think. So, I'm bullish on humanity, but not all of it. And I think probably, going back to the two-tier society thing, I don't know, we've already got a two-tier society. We saw it during the pandemic. There were people who looked at what was going on, said, okay, how am I going to navigate this? Because obviously I don't want to be locked in my house, and I don't want to do irrational things, which I consider to be completely irrational. And people navigated it in a different way. But when you jumped over to the liberty side during that situation, you found it was a very fertile ground full of people. But it was probably only 10% of people. I don't know, maybe you've had a different experience.
I've had a very similar experience, and I do think that is a subset of individuals that have not only kind of the mental fortitude, but also to a certain degree the mental resources and physical resources to be able to stand their ground in something like this. I think that's going to the, kind of to the question, you said that not a lot of people, very few people can truly accept and be free, and the others cannot. I completely agree with that. And under that paradigm, we almost come to the realization of, if we are, say, those people in control, we understand that a majority of the population will follow. So what is necessary at this point in time, in my opinion, is to change the form of control that we're currently experiencing, from one of centralization, from one of top-down directive based on individual incentives, to a decentralized system of governance and control that then the rest of the population just naturally coalesces behind, right? And that's why I really believe and hope for the concept of free cities, of free jurisdictions, and free nation states almost becoming these hotbeds of individuals that eventually grow to influence other countries and other initiatives that then become, I don't want to say the next new world order or new world government or however you want to phrase it, but becomes that next decentralized control structure under which everybody else just naturally wants to join because it is in their highest benefit to do so, right? It's like, oh, I can be oppressed or I can have all of this freedom and it doesn't cost me anything. In fact, I gain more from it than I do in this system right now. That's an easy move for people, just like we mentioned with the UBI, right? There is some just basic, some kind of incentive for the lowest common denominator to switch and go, yeah, this is easier. This is the easiest path for me, and I will abide by those rules.
Which you could argue that is happening right now. The reason you are currently living in Montenegro is a government has been vying for your business, and you see that a lot now. We've been, like I say, we came here from Montenegro community, and many of them have been now enticed here with the new digital nomad zero tax policy that they're bringing in. Portugal did it, and it was hugely successful. In fact, I think too successful, possibly. It sounds like a lot of digital nomads are pissed off with with Portugal now because there's too many people there, and land prices went up and everything. But I think at the heart of this decentralized system is a change of the form of government back to being someone who has to basically you're the customer of, instead of currently being the subject of. And I don't know necessarily what incentivizes that, because I don't think we see many examples of centralized powers not wanting to centralize more and more and more. I mean, it seems quite a common thing. And if you believe that, you probably argue that the only way out is complete collapse. So how do you get out of that rut how would you pontificate that you could solve that problem?
I think that if the pace of decentralization and these decentralized communities, economies, governance structures starts to hit a certain network effect, kind of you can consider it to the nodes on the Bitcoin network. Once it reaches a certain capacity, it becomes unstoppable, right? There's just so much impact of that network on anybody who's in close proximity to it that it gets sucked in. And those control structures that are still centralized simply do not have the resources, real resources. I'm not talking about printing infinite money, okay? There is a finite, despite what common economic models and theories suggest, there is a finite amount of things on this planet in this universe. Yeah, there's a lot of it, okay? But there's still a finite amount, right? Okay, unless you talk about multiverse theory and everything else, but let's just stick out of the that realm for the time being. As a centralized system trying to battle a decentralized one, the centralized system will not have that ability of gathering infinite amount of or gathering a finite amount of resources with an infinite control structure, thereby the fiat money system, right, to battle against these decentralized ones in enough time. So what I'm effectively saying is that the good scenario here is that decentralized evolution happens faster than centralized control can combat it, right? That's the easy scenario. The hard scenario is that, they're pretty close 1-1. You have to do the hard reset. You have to have the chaos. You have to have an element at point in time where decentralized ecosystems simply are just more effective. Like, for example, right, in a global collapse, are you really going to give a shit about a carbon credit? Are you really going to give a shit about who's saying what kind of, things you should be putting in your body? You're going to be like, no, man, I'm trusting that guy because he gets my fish tomorrow. That's it. That's it. You naturally, human beings gravitate toward more, very close-knit type of ecosystem. And then those ecosystems start to interact with one another, and it becomes decentralized by definition, by nature. Right? Are
you of the belief that this model of decentralized governance jurisdictions has to run on Bitcoin? Would that be your hypothesis?
Bitcoin maxis will hate me, which I am one. But no, actually, it does not. Fundamentally speaking, what you have at the heart of this question of what do you use as a medium exchange is you need something that matches very well the production capacity of that economy with the resources available, and available not just locally, but through trade, right? That is a very difficult system to balance artificially, which is what CBDCs would effectively try to do, which is what communism tried to do, right? In terms of resource management. So the best way that we know how right now to manage this is a free market economy, but a truly free market economy. And a truly free market economy focuses and runs on a sound money, right? But a sound money doesn't necessarily have to be that in the form of Bitcoin. Sound money can actually, and it's going to sound weird, but can actually still be fiat currency, right? It's just a matter of how that currency is created, who creates it, and for what purpose. There is a documentary, a really great documentary, and it's the name of escaping me, but I'd love to put it in the show notes after the fact.
Sure.
It's from the 90s or the 80s, like mid 80s. And it talks about Jekyll Island. It talks about the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank. It talks about the fractional monetary system. It's like a 3-hour long documentary, right? And towards the end of the documentary, they start talking about, okay, well, here are the issues that happened when we went off the gold standard. Would our current economy be fixed and solved by going back on the gold standard, which you could effectively, equate to Bitcoin, right? Going on to the Bitcoin standard. And they say, well, there is still other issues with what is known as natural inflation that you come into when you talk about using gold or anything that has a finite or a limited amount of supply for the means of making an economy function. So what do I mean by that, right? And how did they phrase it? So effectively, if you have truly sound money and you have deflationary money coupled with that. And here's the part where kind of Bitcoin comes in, because sound money isn't exactly just Bitcoin. Bitcoin is sound money and deflationary at the same time, right?
Can you just clarify then what sound money is? Sound money and hard money different as well?
No, very similar, right? So sound money effectively goes into the concept of fungibility, of transferability, of it not having an intermediary, right, that you work through. But it's the true definition of kind of money, right, as it stands. The Bitcoin standard describes it much better than I am at this point in time. So if you look at it's the sound money definition of the Bitcoin standard is that. But Bitcoin also brings in an element of deflation, right? And that's the element that actually could get you in trouble when you're trying to run an economy and expand it. Because when an economy grows, that is in de facto called inflation, right? Everybody hears this word inflation and they think like it's some real evil thing. It's not. It's actual growth. Like growth in GDP, that's technically considered inflation. More production of resources, more creating of the gold, not creating, but mining the gold, more coconuts, more food, more things for us to consume and to use. That is inflation. That is the quintessential goal of humanity, is to have more for more people to be able to live, right? But when you introduce a deflationary currency into this, what happens is that the pricing mechanisms of these things over time start to favor hoarding versus actual transferability, versus actual commerce. And what that inflection point is, I don't know. When that hits, I can't quite say. But at some point in time, it would be more efficient for me to simply keep the money that I have to myself, not circulate it, not spend and not grow the economy by paying somebody to go fish and, create certain services and products and everything else, then I just keep it to myself, because in a week, I'll be able to buy 10 fish for the same amount that I had today that I could buy one a week ago. So why should I spend it?
Well,
right?
Can I just interject?
Yeah, please.
You would spend it because we make rational decisions. Like, for example, my phone. If I can buy my phone now, or I could wait 2 years and buy it much cheaper, but I buy it now because I want to use the phone.
Right, because you need it.
Right, exactly. Wouldn't that be the case also under a deflationary economy?
Absolutely.
I would be choosy about what I spend my money on, because I would have a decision to make, which would be I either buy this thing or I potentially make a little bit of money from the deflation. So I'm going to be more picky. I won't waste my money, hopefully, as much, I would imagine. But I'm still going to buy lots of things: food, car, petrol, diesel, whatever,
So let me perhaps phrase it this way, right? If you had all of your life necessities met and then some, plus luxuries, right? And I were to tell you, okay, you have an option. You right now can go spend, let's say, $100 million, okay, to try to create something new for humanity, whatever it is, invest in a company, go space exploration, do X, Y, and Z, or you can do nothing. This has a guaranteed failure rate of 10% and you lose it all. Or you do nothing and you get 300 million back in the same amount of time that you would have invested it in. But you don't have to do anything.
Agreed. But I think a lot of people are driven by other things. I think money is an important incentive, obviously. But if I look back at my own life, I have done plenty of radical things with no concept of remuneration at all, just because I wanted to do them. So I would once again, I'd say people will get more picky. They're not going to waste their money. They're not going to put that 100 million into something that isn't really incredible, even if the failure rate is high. If it's potentially like, well, we might get to live on an asteroid, but there's a 10% chance, it's like, well, fuck yeah, though, but we get to live on an asteroid. Like, I'm going to take that risk. And, and I think, the history is full of people doing things like that.
Absolutely.
I think economists tend to think everyone's sitting around making rational decisions.
No, they're not. Yeah, no, they are far from that. And that's another, actually, I took economics in university, and thank you. And I absolutely despised it for that same reason, because all those models and theories do not work. But on the whole, right, let's just say a certain subset of people will be more careful with their spending. I would consider ourselves in this room to be different from the average individual. But collectively as a whole, even from just that alone, you're already decreasing kind of the amount of spending or the amount of velocity of money that happens as a result of that. And we are the exception. What is the average person going to do, right? Because you have to think, again, on a much broader scale. And in that economy, the average person would rather sit on it, right? And they do nothing and make more than risk something.
I've just thought of something else. Sorry to keep butting in.
No, not at all.
I forget whether what I'm talking about is the Pareto distribution or not, but there is certainly a very prominent and proven theory that within any organization, it's a certain percentage of people that do most of the work, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and they're the ones driving this thing. So in a way, does it matter if those other people hoard the money? Because the true entrepreneurs, the people that drive all these things, this small percentage, are going to be out there risking their capital to do these incredible things. Maybe. I don't know. It's just something I thought of.
No, I think I see where you're going here, right? To me, and this now goes, far outside of what that documentary was talking about in particular, but this is just kind of my own musings. In that particular scenario, you have a subset of humanity taking risks with their own capital for potentially high, and I'm going to say, and here's the kind of critical difference, high change return, not monetary, but like human evolution and change return, very little monetary return with a high amount of risk, versus people that are doing nothing and are slowly able to amass more and more power. At a certain point in time, there's going to be some stupid people that do something that have more power than the risk takers, right? And then we have a conflict. So when you're talking about, again, having a deflationary currency in the system, that incentive alone is a threat. So if you have that removed, what you can do is you can actually better distribute resources to those people who take the risks, and not only incentivize them for taking those risks in terms of what may change the world, but financially reward them as well, right? And that can't necessarily be done on a gold standard. That can't necessarily be done with a deflationary currency as efficiently. I'm not saying it can't be done, but just saying kind of as efficiently. So it's I gotta get that documentary name.
So okay, but so in that case, Bitcoin's importance in the system is what? That argument you've just put forward is an argument against Bitcoin as a whole, not just in the free cities model or the independent jurisdictions model.
It could be
and
seen
you run
like
a Bitcoin company.
Yeah,
so.
it could be seen like that, very much so. So the thing is that, again, Bitcoin may not be the solution, but it is much better than anything that we currently have. And it is the hope for humanity to transition into something better, because we need a period that has something that fits better than what we have right now that will eventually get us to the next step. Bitcoin is almost perfect when you're talking about using it as an actual medium for the global economy, right? The only thing that I could argue is the deflationary side of it. But all of the other elements are critical and essential for any system that comes after the fact, right? So while it may sound negative to say that Bitcoin will not be the thing that saves us, it will be something like Bitcoin, right? But it would be adjusted to the current paradigms that exist. And that's why, I got into Bitcoin. To be completely honest, the reason why I got into Bitcoin early on was like, number go up, honestly. I was just like, oh man. And I was in a trading background, right? And I was like, oh man, I could really make something from this, right? But then as I got deeper into it, I understood the concepts that it had on a social scale. I understood what it took from a humanistic perspective to have a system like this. And I was like, okay, this is our savior, like as a humanity. So why we started Layer 2 brokers in the first place is because we wanted more people to have access to this. We are that bridge. We are the bridge right now between the legacy economy and the Bitcoin economy. And if we can make it fast and efficient for people to be able to get Bitcoin, we're at least doing our part to start to ingrain this technology, and then hopefully also from an educational standpoint, this mindset into people to move forward to the next stage. And when that next stage comes, what it looks like, I don't know, but it sure as hell looks a lot like Bitcoin.
I was going to say that there are a lot of people who would argue that Bitcoin was a discovery. I mean, digital scarcity was the discovery, the uncensorable nature of it, this kind of things. And a lot of people are quite evangelical about that fact that it's not like it's about to be improved upon, as in a substantial way. No more or less than the discovery of fire. We improved on it. We managed to get gas ovens instead of putting, it's still fire. It's just we've kind of morphed it. Are you in that category of people that think that the discovery was a one-time thing? Yes.
Absolutely. Again, it was a discovery, not an invention, right? Even though things that went into Bitcoin were already invented, it is the combination of those things that formed the discovery. And the discovery, once it's out there, it cannot be supplanted by something else. It can only be evolved. And that's why I say, again, the future is maybe not Bitcoin, but something like Bitcoin. It's not the fire, it's not the hearth in the middle of the room that we cook things on open flame, but it might be a propane burner stove, right? There's certain things that we do very similar between those two, but yet the underpinnings of it is way more evolved and way more
Do you mean that the base layer of it will always be Bitcoin? Or do you mean something completely new?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because arguably, once again, those same people that say it was an invention would also argue that in its capacity as a value transfer mechanism, that can also only happen once, because the market didn't know what it was in the beginning, and that was the only way for a decentralized protocol like that to sort of emerge without, in terms of value, without the market sort of front running it, basically, which is what would happen now. You can't. The only way you could do it again would be to legislate for it, And when you go into Bitcoin, you realize that the simple fact that it's free and open and doesn't need legislating it's one of its major selling points. It's an opt-in system. The only way to combat that is a forced opt-in system. And we know that's not going to work because, they always, so what do you think?
So
how can it be something else? And give me
That's a really hard question. Really, really hard question. Would it be the same underlying protocol that would be the next evolution, right?
I'm thinking, all right, we've got Lightning Network now.
We've got all
Liquid,
the layer 2.
Or, L2s, L3s. There's no L minus ones and L zeros.
No.
But are you talking about new layers or new protocols, or just the whole thing becomes something else?
I want to say that it is going to be new layers on the underlying protocol, right? But at a certain point, you get so many layers that the underlying protocol is almost invisible, right? So, kind of harken back to the internet, TCP/IP. Right? And almost nobody at this point knows what it is, how it functions, yet it underpins everything that the internet is. And those core protocols and the internet that we see today, vastly different in appearance and functionality, right? Yet they could not have been separate. They had to evolve from one. So that's kind of how I see Bitcoin in this particular sense, is that you have so many layers that start to get built on top that eventually the underlying protocol does something completely different, so to speak, with the same tenets, because the governance cannot change. Decentralized cannot change. That is what is needed for anything that comes in the future, right? But everything else that comes after it can mold, can change, can adapt, can be more fitted to the situation at hand and the needs of society and the needs of this growing decentralized governance structure of the world, right? Can it be something completely different? No, because again, you can't reinvent fire. It is already in existence.
But nuclear fission was discovered.
Can something better come up?
It's a kind of better version of fire in a way, isn't it?
That's true. That's true. I'm not smart enough to even create what the vision of something that next could be. Again, the only thing I know just from the common pretense, right, is that there are certain fundamental elements that need to stay in place. Like, for example, right, we need energy. Energy can be created in many different ways. That I know. I can't predict that it's going to be asteroid mining, some kind of hydrothermal, collecting the gases and then changing it, or some neutron reactor or fission, or those specifics, I don't know. Similarly, kind of Bitcoin, what those things look like, I don't know. But I know the fundamental is the need for a sound money and a decentralized, intermediary-less way of transfer. That's the way forward for humanity.
And arguably, once again, as a result of the internet and the digitization of the world, it has to be. I mean, we've had cash for years. We've had various final settlement ways of making final settlement with gold coins. This is the money of the digital age. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that it arose now because of the circumstances. And it couldn't have arisen at any other time, obviously. But I think... I've been circling around the edge of the rabbit hole again, and it's like I'm kind of like, do I jump in? Do I jump in or not? And it's like I want to bring the subject back to sort of governance and free cities and stuff, but it's like I do enjoy pontificating over Bitcoin because it is an astonishing thing that's changed the lives of so many people I know. Yeah. And I'm always very surprised when I meet people whose lives aren't being changed by it. But it's most people, actually. Like we were talking about, the kind of the group of people in the world that really wanted to sort of, who strove for liberty during the lockdowns. It's a small number of people, and people that want to understand and get to know Bitcoin very well. That's actually a small number of people as well, as it goes. I don't think that necessarily matters with adoption, because I think, like you say, people don't know what TCP is. People don't know what the Visa network is. They're still out there using all this kind of stuff. But would you say that from a personal perspective, being in that environment a lot, you run a Bitcoin company, you're probably thinking about it 65% of the time, and you're really in there. Are you bullish on the whole thing turning out the way that we all want it to, as a freedom tool, as a tool for freedom?
Yeah, without question. That's the thing, right? Number go up brought me in, but then the people made me stay. Because as you said, you meet so many different kinds of people from all walks of life: doctors, lawyers, people in finance, engineers, everyday average workers, that, everybody. And they all have something in common within their own story and how Bitcoin was special to them, right? And that unifying nature was something that made me go, aha, there is something here that's more than just fintech. That's more than just digital. There's a real human aspect to this. And insofar as evolving ourselves as people, Bitcoin being the vehicle for that evolution, I firmly believe in that. And I think about that every day. That's why I love being in this space. That's why I love meeting with people that are also of like mind, and people that are on the other side of the argument. Because I think being able to see both gives you an understanding of maybe what could be the collective path forward. Because no matter how we look at it, right, there are going to be competing systems, right? And you can take that as CBDCs, you can take that as shitcoins, you can take that as this, that, other protocols, whatever. The point is that competition is healthy, because at the end of the day, it's something that provides the more value to the most people with the least friction that gains hold. And that, I believe, is happening right now from a financial standpoint, but also happening from a humanistic standpoint. And it's like, this whole situation with the lockdowns and the pandemic, honestly, before it happened, I was kind of like, there's probably some like-minded people like me. I haven't seen them. But ever since that has happened, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, there's more of us. Hey, it's bringing to light these people that have the same types of belief systems, that have the same types of aspirations, and these events bring that out. And I think that's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin brings that out in humanity, and with that, we are able to drive forward and build a new future. And I really hope that everybody kind of gets into Bitcoin for that reason. Although money go up can be, a first allure, but they will stay for that reason. Anybody that has stayed in it this long, they're all of the same mind. All of them.
Hallelujah, Nick.
Amen. Praise Bitcoin Jesus.
One final question. It's a nice way to end. One final question. It's a little tradition on this podcast. You have a paid for 1 year sabbatical. Someone's patronizing you to be able to do whatever you want to do. It's up to you. What would you do in that year?
Do you want the selfish answer or do you want the altruistic answer?
Well,
I'll give you both.
Go on.
Okay.
I mean, go on.
Selfish answer, and I mean this.
Is that an Ayn Randian selfishness, or is that like, as in, do you know Ayn Rand?
No.
Oh, okay, no. Right. No, she's just sort of redefined selfishness as being your highest value, really.
Oh, okay.
Well, which is true in many. I mean,
well, let's see if that ends up to be the case. So, in a completely selfish manner, to answer that question, and selfish, I mean literally just thinking of myself, not thinking of my kids, not thinking of my spouse, not thinking of anybody. I would spend the next year just in nature, like literally absorbing every aspect of it, working on things that are tangible with my hands, because I work so much in front of a screen, and it really is something that's so ingrained in humanity to see the fruits of your labor come to fruition right then and there, like again, bushcraft. And I would do that for a year. I would just say fuck it to everything, to the business, to the movement, to everybody in my family, and just do that. That's the selfish answer. The altruistic answer is, and are we assuming unlimited resources here?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So again, nature, yeah, even with unlimited resource, I basically wouldn't use any. And in the most altruistic sense with those resources, what I would do is I would first try to build the same type of contingencies that we described, to me as a global citizen, for my family and for those really close to me. And I would help them with those things and give the resources necessary to have them do the same things that I am doing right now, and basically educate. And then bring at least a collective of humans up a level that at least I feel up a level, right? And that would require giving them substantial amount of economic resources, educational resources, consulting in terms of, how do you talk to this? How do you acquire that? What do you do? How do you think? How do you form? Right? And yeah, so that would be my altruistic answer.
Maybe you could do 6 months on, 6 months off.
Yeah, maybe.
And in the 6 months when you're not out in nature, do what I do, which is sit and watch bushcraft YouTube channels and late into the night, and live vicariously through those people.
I am guilty of that.
I know, it's a funny pastime, isn't it? I'm exactly the same as you. I'm a big fan of that lifestyle, and have done it a lot my life. And we even have a bit of woodland up at ours, and come summertime, we're always cooking outside most nights, and just,
nice.
I've got the tools of the trade, I've got a nice fixed blade, and I like, all that kind of stuff. But, when I can't do it, it's definitely YouTube channels or those channels where you get guys out in Asia building underground houses and stuff. Do you know that one?
Yeah, that's fake though, right?
Is it?
Yeah, that's
do they do it with a digger or something?
Oh, it's not just that. I have to interject here, but originally the guy, he's in Australia, right? He started the whole trend. He started from nothing, right? And then he built the rock. Then with the rock, he cut down the tree. With the tree, he built a little hut.
Right.
Right. And then that phenomena took hold. And now there's people that are literally doing it and showcasing this underwater water or underground waterfall where they're putting candles and digging into everything. Yeah. And some guy went and exposed them, and he like flew a drone over the site. Excavators, 10 or 20 people.
Really?
Yeah, they did an interview of one of those guys, and they're like, oh yeah, like we do this in a matter of like 46 hours. We have these projects planned out. Our YouTube videos are this, because it's such a big cash cow for them now, right? Because you're living in the middle of nowhere, economically speaking, and then all of a sudden you can go on YouTube and make way more than a North American makes.
And multi-million views. Yeah. So you're talking, tens of thousands of pounds per.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's such a shame.
I know. I'm sorry to burst that bubble for you.
Well, I mean, I should have predicted that, obviously, but I didn't care, Well, I reckon someone somewhere is out there doing it honestly.
That first guy, I have to remember the name.
Yeah, I know the guy you mean. He did. He made his own, he mixed mud with sand and whatever and gravel and made his own, Wow. Okay. Well, look, Nik, thanks for a wonderful chat, and I've very much enjoyed meeting you. It's been phenomenal. And good luck with Bitcoin Reserve. I don't think you need it. It seems to be doing okay. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Tim. It was an absolute pleasure. And if any time you want to just philosophize again or pontificate on things, I'm always available.
I will, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Part 2 will be far more philosophical as well.
That sounds good.
Thanks.
Cheers.